Welcome back. Let's open up our test and we can see these three methods. I now want a new test for viewing a project page. So let's do it, how about right here? A user can view a project. Okay, so here we're going to say basically, well, given we have a project, so we can take our factory builder that we had here. Given we do have some kind of project in our database. And again, notice we're not yet scoping it to users. When we get to that point, it'll take 5 seconds to update this. Okay, so given a project exists in the database, well, when we try to view that project, so let's say make a GET request to projects / and I think we may change this, but at least for now, I'm going to concatenate the ID of the project. Okay, so if I visit that page, I'm going to assert that I see two things, the title of the project, as well as the description of the project. All right, and we can put all of these on their own line. Let's run the test, and it fails. So you can see it's looking through all of this HTML here, but again, we know there's not even an endpoint set up yet. So as I will often do, let's disable Laravel's graceful exception handling because I want to see the exact exception that will be thrown. Okay, there we go. Not found HTTP exception. All right, let's go back to our routes file. And we'll say right here, if you make a GET request to some specific project, well, then I will show a show method. All right, projects controller. Right here will be our show method. And this is where I will fetch a project. So I'm going to do this in two different ways to show you that once you have your test, you can refactor really easily with complete assurance. You don't even have to open the browser until you're ready. So I'm going to find the project with an ID equal to what was passed in. So that will be accepted here. We grab that wildcard, which will be the ID, and then we say project find that ID. However, what if gibberish is passed or it's something that doesn't exist? I'm going to change this to find or fail to ensure that we do throw an exception in that case. Okay, then I'm going to load a view. So I will share this projects.show and we'll pass it through. Okay, let's run the test again. And now it should squawk, yeah, that we don't have that view. Okay, resources, views, projects, show.blade.php. And actually maybe one more time. So we do have this full HTML. Of course, in real life, we want to use layout files. One more time, I'm going to do it like this, and then we'll refactor. Okay, so right here, we would have the title of the project, and then within a div, the description. Okay, let's run the test again, and I do get green, so that's now working. Great. But now note that because my test is passing, I can do some refactoring. So in Laravel from scratch, we learned about route model binding, right? That allows us to bind a route to a model, which means I can say, all right, well, auto-inject the project in question or the project associated with that wildcard. And now I can delete that. And if I run the test again, I still get green. Okay, and then actually real quick, let's clean this up just a touch. Next, if I come back to project test, yeah, I noted this is how we build up our path to a project. But as you can imagine, because this application is dedicated to projects, getting the path to a specific project is something we'll probably do over and over. So I hate the idea of having to repeatedly use concatenation, especially what if we later change to some kind of unique ID or to a slug? Well, you would then need to update that in multiple places. Alternatively, you could do two things. You could use a named route. That allows you to assign a name to a route without revealing its specific URI. Or alternatively, something I like to do is add a path method to the model. So to try that out, let's build up a unit test for projects, because I already know we're going to do that. Make me a test called project test, and it is a unit test. Okay, so now we'll find it here. Okay, so this is not a feature test. You can call it a unit test. In this case, I'm treating it as a model test, something a model can do. So what does the project do? Well, among other things, it knows its path. So it has a path. Okay, so here we're going to say, well, given I have a project, and I can say here factory for a project and create it. Well, if I then call the path method, so notice I'm just interacting with the model the way I want it to work. So assuming I have a project, I want to be able to call this method path, and that should return basically what we were doing earlier. It should return /projects/ and then the ID of the project. Makes sense? Now, real quick, let's do use refresh database. Save it, and let's give this a run. It fails. Call to undefined method path. All right. We'll go to project. We'll add our first method here, and that'll return projects/ the ID. All right, let's run our test again. And that now returns green, which means even in my views, I can now just call a path method that will dynamically construct the correct path. All right, which means if I go back to project test, I can change this to project path. And if I run that, I should still get green. Okay. Next, if we go to our views, projects.index, this is the view that will loop through and display every project, but it's now going to be an anchor tag that links to the project in question. Like so. Project, path. All right, why don't we view this in the browser? Because we've been using TDD, you can actually get a long ways before you even have to open a browser. That's a big benefit. But let's see something on the page, as rough as it looks. So we have birdboard.test. And there's our landing page. Let's go to projects. And I do expect this to blow up. And that's because we've run the migrations for our test database, but not yet for local. So let's go ahead and do that. PHP Artisan migrate. Now, if I come back and refresh, we don't see an error. But I also don't see any projects. Why don't we make that a little more clear? I can use for else here. For else project as project, and then we'll say empty. No projects yet. So it's simply a way to handle a for each, but also the case where the array you're providing is empty. So if I come back and give it a refresh, now we have some feedback. So let's quickly whip up some dummy records. Factory for a project. Let's do 5 of them. All right, come back, refresh, and now we have 5 new projects, and each one will link to a specific project page. No styling yet, but it does in fact work. All right, we'll move on in the next episode.